podcast time. Church bells and the cultural hall. Let's start the show.
It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall. Shall we call it miscommunication? Shall we call it one person expecting the other and the other person expecting the other? Should we say that it was just meant to be? Serendipitous, if you will. He is back now from Peru. It is Taylor, Old One Chain, the guy who started the chains in the Cultural Hall, Westbrook. Welcome back from Peru, and welcome back into the Cultural Hall.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to say I was a little ticked off hearing all the episodes, 2 chains, 3 chains, 4 chains. I feel like I was being replaced.
Not
I leave
replaced.
the country and all of a sudden.
Yeah, not replaced, but it has definitely become a thing. So now I feel like any future co-host has to have a stance on where they feel about the chains. Whether they are
Fair
no
enough.
chains, because I am Richie No Chain Stedman. I will not ever be a chain guy. But they have to weigh in on where they think it should be. You just wearing the always one chain.
Just the singular chain. But I don't show up in a wizard hat trying to be Verlin. Okay, I
Whoa.
don't come here with ashy elbows trying to be Molly the Ash. I don't come with my pharaoh staff trying to be Corey. I just feel like my identity is being stolen. Identity theft is not a joke, Jim.
Well, listen. I appreciate the Office reference.
There we go. I was hoping to do that.
Look at it this way. Let me give you a paradigm shift. Let me channel the now gone on to the other side and doing mission work for those that have passed on Stephen R. Covey. Let me give you that paradigm shift and say that mockery is the greatest form of flattery. Maybe they
Fair
wish.
enough. Okay, I'll take
Maybe
that.
they wish they could be one chain, and so they have to 2 chain, 3 chain, 4 chain.
Yeah. Okay. I like that paradigm shift. I'll take that perspective on it.
Okay, good. Posthumously, we honor Stephen R. Covey. Now, you expecting the whole time while you were in Peru, you were like, Richie, why don't you reach out? And I, the whole time you were in Peru, expecting you to be like, hey, let's do this. That was a fun miscommunication, but now we missed each other for 2.5 months and you're back in the United States.
Yep. And then we tried to work it out to record on my second to last day, and then that was just a whole mess. So, but here we are. Now we can do a summary of the entire trip in case anything interesting happened that last day that would have gotten missed.
I want
Spoiler
to,
alert,
for people,
nothing interesting happened that last day.
For people who don't know, you served your mission in Peru, but you're not fresh off the boat or fresh in the United States from being a missionary in Peru, and you're like going back to meet the girl that was in the ward, right? It's been several years since your mission, and you decided to go back. So why are you doing this? Why did you do it?
Yeah, so I finished. I came home from my mission almost 8 years ago. So started my mission 10 years ago. And it's the second time I've been back. First time was for a honeymoon, believe it or not. So wanted to make new memories, ones that weren't tied to that. But there were a lot of reasons. A lot of things lined up in my life that just kind of allowed me to be able to take a trip. But you might have seen I posted on Instagram and Facebook the other day, kind of talking a little bit more in depth about why I took that trip.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of it was wanting to kind of go back to a place where, just like anyone else who's served a mission, maybe not everyone has a good experience on their mission, but for me at least, Peru, and specifically the area of Peru where I was, like Cusco in southern Peru, represented a time and a place where I was a lot more spiritually connected, felt like I had a lot more purpose. And I'd kind of, I don't know how deep we want to get about this.
As deep as you're willing,
But-
baby. Let's go.
All right, fair enough. Life has thrown some challenges at me the last couple of years. Got divorced about 2 years ago. In the last couple of months, I've lost some family members, my cousin Freddie, my Uncle Sam. My Uncle Sam passed away while I was in Peru, actually. That was kind of a surprising loss at a pretty young age. And then I also shared that kind of the biggest thing that has happened in my life recently that kind of led me to want to, do something to reconnect and, separate myself maybe a little bit from the life I was living was last year I found out I was going to be a father, actually.
Hmm.
For anyone doing the math on, wait, he got divorced 2 years ago and then found out he was going to be dad. Yeah, I was not married. If anyone would like to send your judgment, that's contact@theculturalhall.com. Um,
Yeah, send it
but
there.
yeah,
Send your
and
judgment there. Contact at
exactly,
theculturalhall.com. Yeah, send it.
exactly. Um, but and it wasn't it was far from like the ideal scenario. It was not expected. It was a big shock, but I was really excited. I don't know, like I was scared for a few minutes and then the overall feeling was just excitement and yeah, getting ready for it. But unfortunately, that pregnancy ended in miscarriage back in August. Um, and so yeah, that was definitely a big catalyst of just kind of wanting to reconnect with God and I don't know, find more purpose in life. And I definitely feel like I've achieved some of that for sure in the past 2 months. Time to kind of get back home and search for a new job, search for a new place to live, all that good stuff. But yeah.
I think that it's pretty admirable. A few things. One, certainly you didn't have to share about the expected child. I didn't know if they were, I knew that, but I didn't know if you were going to share that. So, yeah, send all that judgment, contact at theculturalhall.com. But that does put an interesting sort of like perspective on life, on like who you're dating, because regardless of if you ended up marrying that person, you are connected because that's the kind of person you are. You will be connected to that person because of the child for the next forever, really. I mean, some people would just say the 18 years or whatever. Obviously, that's not how this circumstance worked out. And maybe some grief around that, and maybe some around that as well. I think both can exist in the same place. But I do think that you get some of those things where life just kind of seems to be overwhelming and you can't figure it out in the place that you're at, like in the physical place with the people that you're with all of that. And so to just be able to go, this is what I need and remove yourself from it, that's pretty ballsy, if I can use that word.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate there. Yeah, there's definitely grief that comes along with it. I think regardless of the, like you were saying, if you have a child with somebody, there's that connection forever. I still feel that no matter what, because, we believe in the afterlife and hopefully being able to meet that child someday. Um, but yeah, I think definitely removing myself physically from just being here was a huge help. Having to spend a lot of time by myself, um, just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, traveling all over Peru. I definitely, it was reinforced to me that I am not a planner when it comes to traveling. Much of what you see in like what I've posted is like decided to do that tour, that excursion like an hour before, and then ended up having those great experiences. And if I could shamelessly plug, um, I have been making a bunch of videos about my 2 month trip in Peru. I won't like benefit from anybody watching them, but I think some of the videos I made are pretty cool. If anyone wants to check them out, if you're thinking of going to Peru, and you want some ideas of places to go and things like that, look me up on Instagram. I'm far from like a professional videographer or anything like that, but I think some of them are pretty cool.
You can also, I think, I'm not sure if you can retroactively do it, but you can add the Cultural Hall as a collaborator, and then the like credit or whatever can go towards you, but we can share it with our audience as well. So,
That's true.
anything
That's true.
further, you can tag us and add us as a collaborator, and then people can see it, and then obviously just know that that's what they do, and that's what we've been doing with Verlin on his sort of road trip with his truck. So people have been able
I'm
to,
loving those pictures. I'm loving seeing his trip with the truck. The truck is beautiful, first of
yes,
all,
yes,
and just visiting some great places
yeah.
in the South.
I wish, but so much of the cultural hall is like we just sort of try something, then we go, yeah, that's great. I wish I would have had the foresight, or your words, the planning ahead of time to go, yeah, you know what? We should just make him a collaborator for the cultural hall and share what he's got going on. I do have questions. Being able to go back to where I served my mission in Cleveland, the Cuzco of the United States,
Mhm.
how beneficial for the time in your life that you're at right now was it to be around people that knew you as Elder Westbrook, as like the I don't want to say pinnacle, that's probably putting too much weight on it, but like their connection to God or their introduction to God or their liaison with God, like being a missionary and being among the people that you have served is a vastly different experience post mission. Was that too much weight? Was that the kind of thing you were looking for? Was it a little bit of a little column A, a little column B? What was that experience like?
I don't know that I was like looking for it to feel a certain way. I was certainly excited to see those people.
Hmm.
Um, but then being there and seeing all those people, it hit hard and it was wonderful. For one, you wonder if like how many of them will even remember me, how many of them will remember my name. And a lot of people recognized me and were happy to see me and everything. And probably one of the coolest things I saw in regards to like seeing people that I had served around in their wards and their branches was seeing the amount of people who, for example, I'll give you an experience I had when I was visiting my first area. I was just wandering around, just trying to remember streets and people's houses and such. And I was in a really like far off part of the ward that is now part of a different ward. And I ran into some sister missionaries that were on standing on the street corner with nothing to do. You can tell when the missionaries have absolutely no plan and they're just kind of planted on the corner. I'm sure somebody had just uh, no showed a lesson or something. I don't think they were being lazy, but I went up and introduced myself, and they asked me like, "Hey, do you know any members around here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember two houses in this neighborhood. That's all I remember." Went to the first house, they weren't there. Well, great. Well, now you know where they live. And then I said, "Oh, and on the corner over there." There was an investigator that I was teaching. I only taught her like 3 or 4 times right when I started my mission, but we could go pop in, see if she still lives there. We're walking as we get closer to the house. They're like, "Oh no, there are members that live in that house." And my thought is like, "Oh, okay, yeah, she must have moved and another family moved in."
Sure.
We go knock on the door, and it's her. And her and her whole family got baptized, joined the church like 4 months ago. So
Wow.
this person that I was teaching almost 10 years ago and who we didn't even find, she was already in our area book when I got there. So who knows how long ago she was introduced to the church, just recently her and her whole family joined the church. And that happened with another family in that same city. And, the amount of converts I have, I guess you could put it as, or the number of people who I taught who then went on to be baptized doubled from what I thought it was
Hmm.
at the end of my mission. Um, so experiences like that, it was really cool just being around those people, and I feel like it did kind of, I don't know, give me more of a sense of, like I was saying, one of the things I was kind of going down there for was to align and feel more in touch with like having a purpose in life and such. And I mean, I don't know what else could make you feel like you have purpose in life than like seeing your efforts be a part of God's hand in people's lives.
Sure. One of the things that I have thought as I've had the opportunity to go as well. So one of the times I went to Cleveland, it was sort of this call to repentance, a little bit like you were able to be instrumental in God's hands because you were living your life differently than you were at that time, which I was like, got it. I got it. I'll, autocorrect. But another time, I don't know. I don't know, maybe the best way to kind of vocalize it, but it was just like a reset, which was like, hey, you are doing the things that you have been doing, and you do not have to do the things that you have been doing anymore. And there can be a direction change just like that. I think so many times we think, oh, I've made the choices, or this is where I'm at, and I can't possibly make a different choice. And I think there are some circumstances that occurs, but I think for the most part, if I'm reflecting kind of what you're saying, is like you can go and you can come back and you can be the same person you were before you left, or you can come back and you can be changed because of the experience that you've had. And now, as you look towards career or dating or family or whatever the thing is, you can continue to do, for better or worse, what you were doing before, or you can do and make a completely different choice, and you get to do that. I think that's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. On my flight home from Peru, I was actually seated next to a sister missionary who was finishing her mission, which was really cool. I actually almost changed my seat too, because I thought I had a middle seat, but I didn't, so I didn't change it, and then ended up seated next to sister. Oh, don't remember her name, but anyway, and that was a little bit of what we were talking about. She was asking me like if I had any advice for coming home from a remission. And years ago, I actually was in a LDS Living video about coming home from your mission, and I think it's called Now What or something like that. I can track that video down, and it was just a bunch of return missionaries who had served the entire mission, some people who had come home early, and all in between, just talking about advice for missionaries. And some of the advice that I gave to her was not worrying too much about like going back to like all the things you used to do. When you're on your mission, you're like, oh, I just so badly want to go do this with my friends that I used to do,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Um, and I was just telling her like, don't be so fixated on going back to too many things that you used to do, because then maybe you'll find yourself kind of regressing in certain ways. The things that you still feel a strong desire to do or you feel passionate about doing will come if they need to be part of your life, and there might be some things that you need to just kind of leave behind, like we're saying. There's at any moment we can just make a different decision and move forward.
I think it's quaint. Is that the word I want to use? That you're trying to tell us you didn't get that sister missionary's phone number and that you guys aren't going on a date in the very near future. That's very clever on your behalf. I don't need to get in that part of your business.
Richie, I don't know if you know, but the missionaries are still the same age as they always have been when they serve. She's a little too young, I think. She was very nice. She seemed great. I met her dad in the airport
See, you've already
in
met the
LA.
family. You
Okay,
have the
that was I
mission in
shouldn't have added that,
common,
but yeah,
the
it was
language.
great meeting her. She was a great person. I'm not, yeah, no.
Funny. That's funny to me. I like teasing you about that. So let me ask you this. If people are listening to your sort of conversation, you live in Utah.
Yeah.
You are trying to figure this stuff out. If people like wanted to help you, I mean, obviously getting like, hey, I have a someone who's single is probably not the thing you would want to do, but as you were looking at like employment or like perspective or any of that stuff, is there anything that people listening to this can be like, hey, I know a place that's hiring if you want to do this or not? Is there anything that people that listen to this would be willing to do, or tell people what you kind of need? And I'll filter that through the contact at theculturalhall.com email address.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm on the job hunt. Yeah, just contact at the culturalhall.com. You can just look me up on Instagram underscore T Westbrook 56. It's a pretty bad username for remembering to look me up, but yeah, absolutely. I'm open to any opportunities.
But like full time,
I'm
what do
not,
you want to
I'm,
do? Office work? Are we
oh yeah,
outdoors? What
full
are we
time.
looking for?
I am, well, so I've got management experience, phlebotomy experience, translating experience, Spanish to English, English to Spanish. Restaurant experience, not dying to get back into the restaurant business.
Hmm.
But I'm not super picky, but office work, management, assistant management,
And
anything
you'd say
like
Salt
that.
Lake County
Really.
probably because that's where you sort of live.
Yeah, mostly. Well, right now I'm in Utah County actually.
Okay.
Just staying with a friend until I get a new apartment. But I'm a Salt Lake County kid now, even though I grew up in Davis County, but which is just north of Salt Lake County for anyone who isn't familiar with Utah. But yeah, Salt Lake County for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, contact at theculturalhall.com. Send your judgment and your job recommendations. Taylor Westbrook. All right.
I would love to see an email that starts with condemning me for my actions and then ends with a referral for a job.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Listen, people are people. They'll do it. People will do whatever they want. I actually, you know, I think yeah, I think an interesting conversation to be had around that. I want to make sure we get to news, but before we do, knowing that I was going to be having the conversation with you and how you're constantly coming at us for being old, that we need to add a little youth to the cultural hall, and that's why how you actually ended up being here. I decided to do a thing that the kids are doing.
Uh-oh.
I went on to
That's
the
always good.
yeah, I went on to the Chat GPT and I said, "Hey, Chat GPT, I would like you to roast the cultural hall." That is apparently a thing that people are doing on the social media right now. And so it uh, sent me a little thing. And so without further ado, and then we'll take a break and do actual articles of news, I'm going to roast the cultural hall according to Chat GPT. Are you ready for this?
I've never been more ready.
All right. All right. All right. Settle down, folks. Grab your funeral potatoes and green jello because we're about to talk about the Cultural Hall podcast. Oh, wait, call it a show for some reason. The name, the Cultural Hall, just sounds like a place with slightly sticky floors, fluorescent lighting, and the faint smell of decades-old potlucks. You half expect every episode to start with an opening prayer and end with someone asking for volunteers to stack chairs. The content? Bless their hearts. They cover everything from the deepest doctrinal dives that make your old seminary teacher sweat to interviews so niche you wonder if the guest is related to the host. It's the only place where you can get a detailed analysis of pioneer trekking and a spirited debate about the best brand of caffeine-free Diet Coke all in the same hour. It's pretty spot on right now, I think, so far. The vibe? It's got the unique blend of earnestness and trying really hard to be relatable that only exists in certain cultural circles. Sometimes listening Sometimes listening feels less like entertainment and more like overhearing a particularly intense ward council meeting that you weren't invited to. The length? Some of those episodes, let's just say you could drive from Salt Lake to St. George and back and still have some podcast left over. They believe in being thorough, possibly to the point where even the Angel Moroni would say, "All right, guys, wrap it up." The audience, if you've ever used the term "oh my heck" unironically or have strong opinions about the proper way to make fry sauce, congratulations, you're probably a listener. It's the podcast your mom forwards you with the subject line, "Thought you'd find this interesting." But hey, in all seriousness, or as serious as a roast gets, they keep the conversations going, they tackle topics others might avoid, and they've built a community. So let's raise a glass of milk or other non-caffeinated beverage of your choice to the cultural hall. Just maybe try to keep the next episode under the length of a general conference session, okay? We've got casseroles to bake. There it is. I'm being youthful. I roasted the cultural hall.
I'm impressed. It's actually pretty good. It's pretty good. It's pretty spot on, especially the trying way too hard to be relatable part.
Hey!
I'm talking about, well, hold on. I'm involving myself in that. Don't take that too personally.
There's 17 million members of the church. We can't be relatable to everyone. We'll take a break.
Fine.
When we come back in the second half, we'll do actual articles of news. Let me take just a moment to tell you all about bestdjinutah.com. That is the website where you can learn all about me. Oh, sure, you probably feel like you know me, but you know me in the cultural hall sense. I have a DJ company, now 6 of us strong, great event hosts, MCs, and DJs that can be able to make whatever event you have coming up absolutely spectacular, and hope you will reach out to us. Now you're thinking, well, wait a minute, Richie, I don't live in Utah. Would you travel? Absolutely, I would travel. Would they travel? Absolutely, they would travel. Whatever your event is, doesn't have to be a wedding or a community event. We can do all sorts of things. I can teach you line dancing. I can dance with you. We can do partner dancing. We can do all kinds of things, but we can't do any of it if you don't hit me up. You can go to bestdjinutah.com. You can fill out the form to get more information or get a quote, and then I will get right back to you. Find out why I'm so busy and why sometimes we don't get episodes of the Cultural Hall. It's all because of bestdjinutah.com. Here in the second half of articles of news, we do actual articles of news. There we go. Got it. Hit it, Peter.
You can't lose articles of news.
And away we go. A heavier kind of news. We'll drift in and out of various pretty actually heavy topics. So welcome back to the mainland. I don't know.
Yep.
Peru is whatever. Welcome back to the United States, where nothing's been going on here. You didn't miss anything here. Calm.
Nope, not
Super
at all.
chill. Super nothing going on. Wait, what? Nah. Nothing to talk about. I actually turned the news on and it's like, we've got nothing to talk about. All is well. We're going to go watch an episode of The Office. I guess I meant to ask you this. As far as Peruvians and their attitudes toward the United States, is there any sort of thought or feeling down there?
Every single person, when I told them, because most people in Peru don't know where I'm from. I'm kind of racially ambiguous there and here actually.
Sure.
And every time I tell somebody that I'm from the U.S., their first question is, "What do you think about Trump?" So lots of interesting conversations there about deportations and all that stuff.
Sure.
All the fun topics.
Okay. All right. So let's get into the news. This news order, sort of selected by Taylor, lovingly crafted by me to kind of get in on it. The headline: what the LDS Church and others are doing under a new Utah law to protect kids from sexual abuse. Let's go here.
Yeah. So there's a new law in Utah, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints aims to be compliant with the new law from day one, which will be May 1st. And essentially, what the law that was passed by Utah legislature and signed by Governor Spencer Cox states is that by May 1st, all Utah organizations that provide services to children under 18 must check the names of their staffers or volunteers against two databases of registered sex offenders. So, church has the goal of by May 1st, having completed this with any current leaders or volunteers that work with youth, and then ongoing thereafter, checking against those registries. So, the a church spokesperson essentially said, this is not aimed at any one church, but it is important to prevent abuse of children in the state of Utah, and they laid out some instructions for church leaders on how to execute this in a timely manner and sent a letter to all lay bishops in the state of Utah.
Yeah, a lot of this. So there's a gentleman who lives in St. George who listens to the Cultural Hall. I won't name him here because I don't know if he wants to be named. He didn't give me permission to or not, but he serves as an executive secretary, and this has largely fallen on his shoulders.
Yeah,
Find
that's
find
what it
out,
sounded like.
yeah, find out if these people are on any of these lists. Now, here's the thing. Uh, there are a couple of feelings that people have around this. One, which is, so we just needed a law and now you guys are doing it. A lot of people are like, why weren't we doing this anyway? But now that Utah and the Utah legislature has said, hey, we're going to do it, the church is on board and obviously wanting to be compliant. Kudos to them for that and saying laws in effect on the 1st of May. Let's get after it and make sure that we're there. I think that's awesome. This doesn't, at least to my knowledge, affect states where the laws aren't in place like this. Like the church didn't make it a sweeping statewide or states-wide implementation of doing this, and they should. I don't know why. Maybe we would learn the lessons that we go through here and then be able to share it with different states. There are other states that require this. But by
Mhm.
and large, I think that there are more states that don't require something like this. That I just think we go, listen, if you're working with youth, the least we can do is these two databases, check it.
100%. And I mean, to your point that maybe, some people might say, why weren't we doing this before? In this article, it talks about two other churches in Utah. First, Reverend Jamie White of Salt Lake's First Presbyterian Church basically talked about that they've been doing this,
Hmm.
that they take fingerprints and that they background check. They have like essentially a daycare and youth center that they run, and that usually the first question parents ask when they bring their kids there is, do you do background checks on anyone that is working with the youth? So I mean, yes, it would be great if we had already been doing this, but better late than never. Now I,
Sure.
I do wonder, I do agree that not making it a sweeping implementation across the churches, maybe to kind of see how it rolls out in Utah, and then maybe go further out after that. I wonder what the ramification, let's say if on May 1st we have, or up until then, we have a huge number of people being removed from callings mysteriously, quote unquote,
Hmm.
because of this process of checking against those databases. Would that make it more likely that we see it implemented elsewhere, or would we kind of go into panic mode and not implement it in other places so that there's not this huge ruckus about all these people being uh, basically found out?
Well, I would tell you, I would err on the side of, we always talk about going for the one. And I know that this is not the gospel principle in this respect, but I think that it is. It's like, if there is one, find that one and don't allow them to be with children.
Yeah,
And end of story, end of, questioning as far as I go. Just, I would not put those people in that situation. I would not put those children in that situation. And in the belief of like trying to help these people, I would not put those people in that situation too. If they are still trying to be healed or be, put this in the past and whatever, I would not allow them the opportunity where weaknesses reside. That just
absolutely.
seems like a silly thing. The thing that you bring up that I think is also an excellent point. How awkward or like needful but awkward is it if you're the executive secretary, Taylor, and you're looking it up and you're checking the names and you have to do all the people because we have to be completely compliant and you're like the first counselor in the bishopric. Uh, hey, so Bishop, the First counselor is on the list. Are you sure? No, it can't be. Yeah, I'm sure, and here it is.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm sure in scenarios where people come up, it's going to be really awkward. The instruction that was given is that if a member is found on one of the registries, the person conducting the check should immediately alert the bishop or stake president. The
mhm.
member on the registry is not allowed to serve in any position that puts them in contact with anyone under age 18. So, I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some uncomfortable scenarios, and hopefully, we've learned from the turning a blind eye, and we don't sweep things under the rug if people come up, and try and avoid those awkward interactions, because it's a pretty, in my eyes, it's a very necessary step. And what was kind of interesting was they kind of laid out positions and callings that maybe need to be scrutinized in this way, talking about stake presidencies, bishoprics, teachers in primary and young men's and young women's,
Hmm.
seminary teachers, ministering brothers that have a companion under 18. And it also went over any person working with youth, for example, on Trek. And that's where I feel like maybe there's going to be some oversight of like forgetting to do the checks for, the 50 couples or whatever that are
Right.
called to volunteer with Trek and things like that. But hopefully, we don't just do it between now and May 1st. It becomes a really regular, this is just our standard procedure. We always check, always check before letting anyone into those situations.
Yeah, I would have hoped, and maybe it's a thing that we'll wait and see for a fall conference, that there would be a little bit of discussion around this because it certainly has been such a newsworthy topic that I would have hoped to have it sort of addressed in one way or another during general conference, almost maybe even the way that it's like was it Elder Anderson with the abortion talk where it's like child sexual abuse and just is like, okay, we're going here right now, let's do it, and really being able to talk about that. I would venture to guess that not everyone, not even 50% of members of the church in Utah know that this is going on. Um, and I think that an awareness around it is important in addition to it going on. Yeah, and to your point, we can't, we can't have it not everyone be checked because the one
Yep,
person that doesn't get checked and then something happens, it's like, no, all of them, the 99 and also the one.
100%.
So then we go to Colorado. I thought this was an interesting story about a high school. Uh,
Arizona.
is it Arizona? I thought it was.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right, Vail, Arizona. I saw
Yep.
Vail and I immediately thought Colorado. But about a seminary building being built and how there's some quite a bit of like what the going on with
A
it.
little bit of controversy. So essentially, it looks like this seminary building was announced or was agreed upon, I think, 13 years ago, something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And parents were made aware of it uh, last month during a school board meeting during spring break. So a lot of people are not super happy about it. Obviously, members of the church and their children who attend Cienega High School are happy about it because the closest they did a little interview with one of the students there, a freshman there. And when I first read what he said, I read it in a totally like stereotypical teen voice, so I'm going to do that. He said,
Uh-huh.
I'm super excited that we have release time now. So I usually go to bed around like 11 o'clock. And so then I have to wake up at 5 every morning to go to seminary, and it's super tiring. That plus school and like homework, it's like definitely a hassle. But then I actually watched the video of him talking, and he was a very well-spoken young man. So I regret that, but that's how I read it in my mind when I first read the
Sounds
story.
to me like you sent your judgment to contact at theculturalhall.com.
Absolutely. Contact at cienegahighschool.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people opposing, so this young man and his mother were talking about the blessing that it's going to be. He has to wake up super early, drive 30 minutes to get to seminary before school. So it's great that more people have the opportunity, but then those opposing it were talking about how, it was made public just a month ago during spring break when no one was actually there at the meeting, and that apparently there is a law that the church would potentially be breaking by having the seminary building on the school property.
Yeah, which
Uh,
is the big issue to me. So I think even in Utah, all of these seminary buildings are land adjacent to the high school or middle school, depending on, if it's the ninth grade or in some cases, whatever. Let's not get too tangential there, but it is on property that the church has purchased. It is not on the public property or on the school property. And so that to me, regardless of how you feel about release time, and I think there are a couple other valid points which we'll hit about this, but like I just don't think you can build that on a public land as a private institution and feel like it would be all right. And I can understand why the church, if they didn't own the land, would want to build a building that they would own on land that they don't own.
It makes me wonder if maybe they're mistaken that it is the school's, because it often looks very much like it is on the school's property. Like
Sure.
my high school, I went to Bountiful High School. You pull right into the parking lot. On one side, pulling into the same parking lot is the seminary building, and then you
Hmm.
look to your right and there's the school. You would 100% assume that it is the same property.
Sure.
So I don't know if there's maybe just some confusion there. Obviously, the church is going to be, advantageous and to have it as close to the school as possible. But it would be strange if the church had made some kind of oversight and was just like, oh yeah, build it right on the property. But
I
if they
can
are,
imagine.
yeah, if they are, then obviously they could run into some problems. There was a back in 1948, there was a Supreme Court ruling basically stating that religious classes cannot be taught on school property. But then just 4 years later, there was another Supreme Court ruling stating that release time from school for religious courses does not violate the Constitution so long as it is not taught on the school property.
Hmm. Hmm. Just a little bit more about it. The school district owns the land, which we sort of knew. Uh, and it will also apparently be a building that is a community space for other uses. So it won't just be a seminary building. Think sort of like a
Interesting.
community building that
Kind
would
of
be
like that
on the
one in
school
New York
property.
that we talked
Right.
about a year ago.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. But as
So,
far as
so
at least from what was in the article, they kind of made it sound like if any kind of religious instruction happens during school hours on the school property, then it would be illegal.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and certainly this is headed towards court. The other thing that I think is interesting about it, and I think is a valid thing, those that are teachers at seminary and institutes are not vetted in the same way. Harken back to the first story of this articles of news. They are not vetted the same way, or haven't been to this point, the same way that a public school teacher would be vetted.
right.
So I think the church could go a long way to say, hey, all right, it's release time. It's going to be in a building that isn't the school. And that's how we've sort of threaded that needle of gray area. But we're going to go ahead and make sure that these people are, vetted, searched, blah, 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 so that it's not putting their kids, because no, anyone can take a release time class. You don't have to be a Mormon kid. Anyone can take a release time class. Most likely it would be, but you wouldn't want to put anyone in danger that way. So that's headed to the courts for a good time.
Yeah. And right now the building is set to open in January of next year, but who knows with the legal ramifications that might come, how long it'll be before that building is open, or if they'll have to move it, or I'm sure the church could afford to just buy that land from the school district, so that might be the route they go.
Yeah, and very well could be, right? Depending on if it is in fact like a community building, as the internet told me, or just a seminary building, as that article would tell me. These next couple stories I just think are awesome. So very cool. We talk about the church and its growth in Africa, and I just think it's unreal the amount of growth and attention that's put on it. The NAACP and the Latter Day Saints have done this fellowship to Ghana, and now there's a new documentary out about it.
This looks amazing. I wish I had known about it and could have participated, but it looks like it was up to age 25, so I wouldn't have qualified anyway. But
Too old.
too old, too old. And here we are talking about how young I am, making fun of you guys for being old, and I'm too old for this program. But yeah, this is led by Amos C. Brown, who is a board member of the NAACP, taking these 24 young adults to Ghana to learn about their history. One of the coolest things that I saw is that they took them to Slave River,
Hmm.
which was a river where they would take people who were being taken into slavery to bathe one last time before being loaded onto ships and shipped overseas to other countries to be sold into slavery. I can't imagine what that would be like. I don't know if all of the students, I believe they said they were from diverse backgrounds, so I don't know if they were all of African descent or not. Likely not. Um, but yeah, I'm sure connecting with that history and learning more about it. It also included learning about Latter-day Saints in history who helped, who were abolitionists and things like that. So I mean, I that would be amazing. I didn't see anything about like when this documentary is coming out.
It's out.
It's out.
Yeah, you can get
Okay,
it. There'll be a link in the show notes. It's about 40 minutes, 42 minutes, I want to say long. It's beautifully done.
you watched it.
I did.
I am excited to watch it then. That
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely unreal and worth noting. Dr. Brown, Amos C. Brown, one of the board members of the NAACP, is the one that gave President Nelson that award a couple of years ago from the
Mhm.
NAACP. That everyone, wait, who? Huh? What? Are you kidding? That's that individual.
Yeah.
So that's the connection and that bridge that has been built there, and now being able to turn the spotlight on the folks there in Ghana through that documentary, which takes us to Nigeria.
Yeah, kind of well, little similar point to it with a river in Africa. This time with a little bit more of a positive spin on it, but the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has promised to preserve a location at a river where the pioneer baptisms or the first baptisms were performed in Nigeria. It's in Ikot Eyo community in Nigeria where the first converts of the church were baptized. You can see pictures, and I think there might even be some video, but I'm not sure if there is video, but I've seen pictures of those. I think it was 60 people who were all baptized at that spot back in the 70s, and just an absolutely amazing story there. There's now a monument there, and a representative from the church, Kyle McKay, I believe is his name,
Hmm.
talked about the experience of going there and meeting with members of the church there, but also other leaders and just community members, and saying that we will continue to cooperate with the local tribes and the local authorities to preserve this place because it is special to us and the people here. We feel something sacred at this place among you people. And when I say these people, I'm talking about the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as well as those who are not. We may not all belong to the same church, but we are of the same family. And I believe that God smiles the broadest when all of his children come together to share love, a vision, and Jesus Christ. Sounds just like a really awesome ceremony of preserving this spot that has importance to the community at large, but certainly the members in that community and in Nigeria, which has had, I mean, since then, just exponential, insane growth within the church.
I think it's cool to note because when we think of like historical markers of the church, I think that a lot of times we think about those places in the United States, and I know that there are other places. There's one, a couple actually in England that come to mind. But to know, on the continent of Africa, in the country of Nigeria, to have a monument like that. Now, 1978, when those first converts were baptized, that was a handful, literally less than 10. And then in 2011, there were 103,000 members of the church in Nigeria.
Wow.
Now there are 220, maybe 231,000 plus members of the church in Nigeria. It is the country with the most members of the church on the continent of Africa, which I think is significant and just so cool to see. You talk about you're being able to go back to Peru and being like, oh man, I didn't know that, these two people that I taught, it actually was four people. You have no idea. I guarantee you about the people that you touched, the people that I was able to touch and be in their lives and all that, and how the church has grown because of that. But a really clear example to me of like the Lord's work continuing to go forth. Look at that in Nigeria. Literally 50 years ago, people could not be baptized in Nigeria, and now it's 250,000 people.
Pretty, that's, wow. When you say it like that, that really is amazing. I'd love
Yeah.
to go there too. I'm
Yeah, go.
Nigerian.
You said you are Nigerian?
Yep, I
Are
believe so. From what I know, the little I know of my genealogy from that side of the family, it's a little tricky when you get into like slave trade and
Sure.
tracking people's families and everything. But we've kind of tracked it down through DNA that we're in that region, and Nigeria is, I believe, it's the most populous country in Africa, and we are from that region, so most likely. So I don't know, maybe
There
that'll
you
be
go.
my next
Gotta go.
sabbatical. Go to Nigeria.
Yeah. Get your life together, let it fall apart, and go to Nigeria.
That's the plan.
Done.
Just, just an endless cycle. Fall apart, go to a new country.
It is an amazingly powerful thing. I wanted to keep the spotlight on you, but when I was about your age, a little bit older, I went to clown college in Chicago with a similar sort of experience. And
Hmm.
I had to remove myself entirely from the situation that I was in here in Utah and to be able to just dive headlong into the different things, see what really mattered to me, and then was able to come back with a different perspective. Life changing in a way
Hmm.
that it sounds ridiculous when you say clown college changed my
Clown.
life. But in the same way where you're like, I ran off to Cuzco for a couple of months and now I'm a changed person. That doesn't seem that silly to me.
Fair enough.
Where shall we go now? How about we talk about, oh, the demon problem in the church?
This was interesting to me. This is seems like just kind of an opinion piece.
Yeah.
Talking about the correlation in some stories that we've covered pretty extensively here in the Cultural Hall. Stories like that of Ruby Frankie and
Hmm.
Lori Vallow Daybell, and the involvement of demonic possessions or the belief of demonic possessions that they played. Um, it basically talks about how essentially these members believe in these demonic possessions and want to exercise or perform exorcisms to get rid of these demons, and how this has played a part. This belief in this doctrine has played a part in uh, some pretty horrible tragedies that we've
Yeah,
seen in the news.
with Lori Vallow being back in court and a lot of people turning their attention towards that. I mean, it's not as traditional as like the Catholic way where it's like, I am possessed right now, call the priest, and he comes over and he goes, it's not that. I think that we mostly, I shouldn't generalize, say, we all, but I think we mostly would look at something like that and go, that's crazy. But for some reason, we find it a little less crazy and a little bit more palatable when it's like, oh, my children have darkness in them, or in the case of
Yeah.
Lori Ballard, my children have become zombies. Now, granted, even that seems a little too cuckoo for me. I'm just like, no, your kids, that's not how that works.
Yeah, but you've talked about before, and I've of the same opinion that there's so many things where you deviate one little degree and then you end up in this weird place. And they talked
Yeah.
about how both in the cases of Ruby Frankie and Lori Vallow, they were both fans of this book, Visions of Glory, which was written by a Latter-day Saint that I haven't read it, but I believe it goes into some detail about demonic possessions. Now, what I kind of found interesting about this article is that it makes it sound like this person is of the opinion that Latter-day Saints are, I don't know, believe very heavily in demonic possessions and that it's a big piece of our doctrine. And I would kind of be of the opinion that I don't know, that seems a lot less prevalent in our church than in others that I've seen. Um,
Yeah.
as an example, I'll speak delicately about this. But not long ago, about 3 months ago, in my ward, a person got up to bear their testimony and then essentially started using a strange voice and was saying that they were possessed and shaking uncontrollably up at the pulpit. And we were all a little freaked out by what was happening, but maybe it's just my brain. Maybe I'm just not, I don't know. Maybe I just don't think that way. But my initial thought was not this person is possessed.
Hmm.
And not up to me to discern whether or not there is some sort of spiritual part of it. My first thought went more towards maybe some sort of mental health episode,
Sure.
something like that. And they, received help from the bishop and mental health help thereafter. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but just from what I've seen, for example, from my family back east, Baptist, I feel like there they would have a much stronger belief and vigor for that kind of thing of being possessed by spirits and things like that.
Yeah, the author, and it is very much of an opinion piece, tries to make the bridge of like, within the creation story, or as we see it played out in the video in the temple, that like the devil possesses or comes into the garden, and that we have to cast him out, and kind of tries to make the stretch that that would be possession. uh it is certainly casting Satan out. I don't know. I just think it's like, hey, if someone in your ward starts saying my kids are zombies and they're not saying it with a chuckle and then drink a little Diet Coke and be like, no, but really I love them, like maybe we should start to be like, yeah, let's keep a careful eye on that. that seems a little sketch. I don't know that we have a bigger problem about it. I think that there are certainly just these couple of cases that
Yeah.
have
And the
highlight them.
yeah, and the author went on to state something that I definitely don't agree with. They said it's time for Latter-day Saint leaders to confront and reform the faith's teachings on demonic possession. This doctrine has convinced many members there are demons in their homes, in their walls, and in their children. These cases of abuse and murder can be directly attributed to this doctrine.
Hmm.
And the perpetrators of these crimes have stated this time and time again. So that, especially that phrase of these cases of abuse can be directly attributed to the doctrine of the church. I don't know. I would push back on that of saying that anyone's actions are their own. I don't think the church is responsible for the abuse that happened to these kids because of some doctrines and such related to demonic possession. And I don't know anyone who believes in the Bible, like it. There's so many. So I don't know. I don't 100% understand where this person was coming from, but I do agree a little bit with at the end talking about that we should, make efforts to protect mental health. And I think as we learn more and more about how humans are, I think a lot of the time those people are just suffering mentally and could use some help before things get to that point.
Yeah. And how about that sacrament meeting where you have a demonic possession testimony? Good for you. That's worth the admission of going to church. Like we just know we're going to get a story about, from one of the sisters that their son hasn't been to church for 40 years, but she keeps praying. I don't know. It's the same testimony. I shouldn't make fun of it. I'm not making fun of it. I just something different every now and then. I realize that talking about women in the church with two men is probably not the thing to do. So let's end on these two stories. Would you like to talk about the Mississippi Man or the man in the volleyball tournament?
I would like to talk about the man in the volleyball tournament
All right,
because
take it. Then I'll take Mississippi Man.
I was confused by this. So it looks like in the church meeting house in Lehi, Utah, where I am right now, actually. I wonder if he's close by. After a
Hope not.
volleyball tournament, a man named Nathan Jack Speaker, 42 years old, was in the church after the volleyball tournament with some family members, a young man, and some other children. Um, just talking, it sounds like. The kids were still playing with the volleyball. A young man, the age is not disclosed here in the article, but stepped in front of Speaker and knocked the ball away from him. And this apparently enraged the man, where he grabbed the young man by the throat, lifted him off the ground, and threw him across the room. Just absolutely horrible. Someone who was nearby but apparently did not see this happen kind of intervened when he saw that the young man was grabbing his throat and crying, and that Speaker was advancing towards the young man again. Um, just an absolutely crazy. I
Yes.
don't quite understand how this all happened, but afterwards, Speaker left a handwritten note at the young man's house for him and his family, essentially apologizing, and then sent a text to his mother asking her not to get the police involved. This part kind of ticked me off.
Yep.
Apparently, in a separate conversation, the dad of the young man said, "Oh, I don't think we need to get the cops involved. He just lifted you off the ground by your throat. That's
Yeah.
all."
Jeez.
Yeah. Speaker was on the run for a little bit, hiding from authorities for I think about 4 days. His family members supposedly, allegedly knew where he was, but were unwilling to cooperate with police. So I'm sure could possibly be some charges for some family members there, but he ultimately was apprehended and was being held without bail.
I can't understand. So being an advocate for my child, being like, so what did he do? He lifted me up by the throat. Okay, well, we don't need to press charges. He's very sorry. Like adults don't attack kids. How about that? Oh, I attacked a kid. I'm really sorry. All right. Well, yeah, you are really sorry and probably don't do that, you know.
Yeah.
I think maybe it can have an impact on maybe the length of the charges. And to be clear, this was just a physical abuse. Not that that makes it any better, but it's not. We're not talking about a sexual abuse scenario. My guess, it's a mouthy kid, you know, and the dad lost his patience. Doesn't make it all right. You don't pick a kid up by the throat. You involve the authorities, and if the authorities say, "Hey, there's no charges to be pressed here," or whatever the thing is, That's sort of beyond. I can't imagine the kid knowing that his dad didn't press charges or whatever is going to be like, "Thanks for believing me, Dad," even though we didn't do anything about it. I don't know. There's a messy, weird situation on that end that I
Very
don't
strange.
love.
I think there was something cited here talking about maybe some suspicion or maybe some known mental health problems
Sure.
that maybe contributed. Maybe the dad was aware of those and felt like it wasn't necessary. But I would say I would be of the persuasion that anytime a child is lifted by their throat, go ahead and call the cops.
Yes. Ugh.
100%.
Okay. And then the last story, and this is, I'm glad that we're getting to a couple of these stories because they've been sort of in the hopper in the queue for a while. We talked about this before. There was a man who set fire to an LDS church. This is last July, that he did it, and I remember talking about this story in the news back then. He, if convicted, faces a minimum penalty of 5 years in prison and a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison on each of the arson charges of which he is accused. A maximum penalty of 20 years in prison for each of the civil rights charges, and a minimum penalty of 10 years in prison for the use of fire to commit a federal felony offense. It has been noted that this guy who deliberately set fire to a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Mississippi, it is a hate crime, and so it escalated everything. And as far as I know, we do not have an update as to how long he's been sentenced. But for crying out loud, I mean, if you don't like a church, don't set fire to it. But
Yeah.
especially not with how the laws are. It's not great. You're gonna find
I wonder
yourself
what,
going to jail for a long time.
I wonder if it was because we've certainly seen cases like this where it is not taken to that hate crime level or civil rights level.
Hmm.
So I wonder if it was like specific comments he made while being apprehended, possibly, or that were used against him to say, "Hey, this was definitely a hate
I
crime. This
hate
wasn't like,
Mormons. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
they would have to prove that
yeah,
in order for him to be put away for as long as it is. But in
yeah,
a quick perusal of the different things, like it doesn't say anything like his Facebook said he hates Mormons. Let's see here. This is a little bit older story, might have a little bit more information on it. Hang on. Uh,
hanging.
let's see here. This, ooh, yeah, okay, here we go. A sex offender, who is this person? He says that Jesus chose him to burn down the church.
Oh,
According
I do remember hearing that.
according to this, he told the agent that he had been reborn to Christ and felt called to action. He believes that the LDS Church is responsible for trafficking and molesting children, and that he was chosen to do his will on earth.
Yeah.
He graffitied the walls with hateful messages like child molesters, cowards, and false prophets, and then torched it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's sufficient
Yeah,
evidence to
yeah,
make it a hate crime.
yeah.
For
So
sure, for sure.
going away for a while. Well, that was a great way to end that story. It was a great way to end that articles of news. Welcome back to the United
Hmm.
States, where everything's cheery, my friend.
Yeah, I feel so uplifted, positive,
Yep.
ready to just step out in the day and tackle life.
Don't forget to send your judgment. Contact at theculturalhall.com. We
Yep,
hope
yep.
that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body,
That you, if you were not well enough to listen this week, that you'll be well enough to listen next week.
and that when the time comes, you'll be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, Chris at Alpine Lakes Travel, Debbie Wanless, Chocolate Cake Bites Podcast, and the Tiger with a U will be saving a seat for you
On the back row,
of the
the
Cultural Hall.
Cultural Hall.
Save me a seat, it's sure to be neat on the back row. We really gotta go on the Culture Hall show.